Hello, how's everyone doing in the Galactic Family Podcast world tonight? Family, today we welcome someone who has been at the very center of America's intelligence and national security efforts. Our guest is Timothy Phillips, a senior National Intelligence Service executive, a retired Marine Corps lieutenant colonel, and the former deputy director of the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, AARO. Throughout his distinguished career, Mr. Phillips has held some of the most critical intelligence and defense positions in our nation. National Intelligence Collection Officer for South Asia at the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, Director of Mission Integration at the National Geospatial-Intelligence Agency, Chief of the National Intelligence Coordination Center, Chief of the Technical Collection for ODNI, and even National Intelligence Fellow at Council on Foreign Relations. Today, he joins us to share his perspective on one of the most important and controversial subjects of our time, the government's ongoing investigations into anomalous phenomenon. And please join me today as we welcome Tim Phillips to the Galactic Family Podcast. How are you doing, sir, tonight?
I am doing wonderful. Hey, I happened to see on your opening trailer, it said that I was the director of AARO. I never was the director. I was the acting director for about 10 months. And then I was appointed as the deputy director. So I don't want to mislead anybody.
Okay, then I
say that I was the director. I never was.
Yes, sir. Then I got that mixed up. I'll correct that when we're done.
No, it's okay. We thought it was extremely important to have a credentialed scientist as the director. You know, I'm a Marine and an intel officer. You know, we need someone smarter than me, you know, to be the director, to understand the science and to give us credibility in the academic and scientific fields.
So can you walk us through your journey from Marine Corps to the deputy director of AARO then?
Sure. You know, I knew nothing about AARO. You know, I grew up in the Marine Corps, and like many of those serving on active duty at that time, 9/11 changed a lot of things. So we had 9/11. I was still on active duty, and a lot of the rules changed concerning transition from military service to civil service. So in the military, you know, we support, we're part of the intelligence community. So we're read into programs, we're trained, but we're not part of the national intelligence community unless you're there on a joint duty assignment somewhere. So after 9/11, we had a huge growth and Title 50 intel and DOD intel community as far as requirements. And they needed people who were vetted, that had active clearances, and who were trained. So I was one of those officers that got out after 21 years of service in the Marine Corps, and I became a civil servant. And about 10 months later, I was invading Iraq the second time as a civilian. And I found out I missed my friends and their toys. Being an intel officer, running around a battlefield, you're kind of all by yourself. I like being part of the division or being a company commander at the time, and help was a radio call away. And it's a little bit different to be out there by yourself with your friends, but you're much more exposed. And that was the thing that really impressed me, is how smart and, you know, how much prior planning you had to do to be able to successfully complete a mission and get back alive.
Oh, yeah. So go ahead, sir.
No, I was, a son of an airman in the U.S. Air Force. Kind of grew up all over the world. Started school in England when my father was flying KB-50s for the Strategic Air Command.
Oh, wow.
Later on, he transitioned and he was out in Westpac. I spent 6 years on the island of Guam when my dad did 2 tours during the Vietnam War, where his wing and squadron was flying out of Guam and they would go into Thailand and Vietnam. So I grew up with the war around me as a kid. I was in elementary school, but I did do my freshman year of high school on the island of Guam. Dad came back, did 2 years at Little Rock Air Force Base, teaching people how to fly C-130s. And then
Nice.
my father retired. He had orders to go back to Vietnam for a third tour. And he had a premonition that he didn't think he'd make it. And so he retired. And ironically, he died shortly after that at age 49 of melanoma cancer. So, the war didn't get him, but a sunburn.
Maybe he knew.
Oh, maybe he knew, but
Yeah.
he came out. But that was my background.
Okay.
My father was encouraging me to, look at the Service Academy or go to the Air Force Academy. And before 1986 or before 1976, they had no women there. And at that time, I just couldn't see going to a school without women. So University of Arizona is right there. And I went to school and had a wonderful time. One night after a rare victory in football, I was in a bar with a bunch of friends I used to box with at the University of Arizona. And we met this guy with short hair, but in great shape. And he kind of challenged our manhood to look at the Marine Corps Officer Platoon Leaders course, where you would go to Quantico, and it'd be a period of 2 6 weeks or a 10-week total. You go down there, and to me, I thought that would be a great way to see what I was made of.
Oh, yeah.
And see if I would like it. I knew nothing about the Marine Corps, and it was the toughest thing I ever did in my life. And to get down there in those hills of Quantico in the summer, learned a lot about myself. And after I graduated, I took my commission and was the second lieutenant of Marines. I was commissioned in my parents' living room on the 5th of July, 1979, and became a Marine officer. And based off my my GT scores and everything, the Marine Corps thought I'd make a great communication electronics officer, and that's what they made me. Yeah. I was stationed there at Camp Lejeune on the East Coast. I did 3 deployments with what at the time was called Marine Amphibious Units. So I was in 6th Fleet, the Indian Ocean. I served in Lebanon and Beirut. So I was there in Beirut. Matter of fact, on the USS Saipan, one of the officers I shared a stateroom on died when the BLT headquarters was attacked there and hit. So that was a changer for me. I'm not sure if it was combat. We weren't allowed to shoot back that often. We were shot at a lot. Took a lot of indirect and small arms fire. But it kind of changes you. I remember the first medevac and the first chopper ride back out to his ship I did with some wounded and one dead Marine. Corporal Reagan was killed that day. And I was part of the litter team, and as soon as we landed on I believe it was the Guam, when we got there, the corpsmen and the medical staff took over. And haven't really been around, I hunted as a kid, but I have been around a lot of wounded Marines, thank God. But I was pretty soaked with arterial blood, and it kind of has a metallic copper taste to me. But when you land on a ship at night, it's red lights, and you really can't see that. But I went into my stateroom and turned on the white lights, and I could see that I was drenched in blood, and that kind of changes you a bit.
It does.
When you go through an experience like that. But I fell in love in the Marine Corps. And I was fortunate enough to, do a full career of 20-something years and retire as a lieutenant colonel. Did a lot, served on Marine Corps, 2nd FSSG. I was with 1st Marine Division, 3rd Marine Division, 1st Tank, 7th Marines. I did an incredible tour at Indo-PACOM, served all over the Pacific. My last tour was at the Defense Information Systems Agency. Learned a lot about strategic command and control, and about infrastructure. The heavy telecommunications and fiber that DoD uses to carry its C2 around the world. Yeah. But things changed after 9/11. They needed people. I was asked to compete for a GS-15 job. I had no intention of working for the government after I left the Marine Corps. Okay. However, I had a a great boss who really wanted me to do it and gave me an illegal order to apply. And I did apply. I was selected, and it started my civil service career. I remember I was asked if I would volunteer for a mission. I said, sure, what is it? And he said, we can't tell you. So I volunteered, and then I found out that I was part of the team that was studying or putting together the plan for stabilization and governing Iraq after we owned it. So we had looked at, how did Eisenhower plan for reconstruction and occupation in Germany? How did MacArthur do it? And we studied that. We were working for a great patriot, a Lieutenant General Gardner, Army officer that after the first Gulf War was working with the Kurds up in northern Iraq. And I deployed with him back into Iraq for the invasion. And I believe that was like March of 2003. So I followed the 3rd ID into Baghdad. We were stationed at Sadat International Airport, as it was called back then. And the Army was running those thunder runs into Baghdad. Going in with their Bradleys and M1s down, a highway into the city, as Baghdad Bob was telling the world we weren't there. And you had M1, tanks downtown. And the 3rd time they did it, we followed in trace and started the exploitation in the Green Zone. And wild experience. I can remember listening to those young troopers. We listened to them on a radio net, and at first, very, very hesitant to return fire. You heard them come up on the net. Hey, we're taking fire from the flank and return it. But a month later, by the time we got to Baghdad, these guys were, beady-eyed killers. They had lived and fought on their equipment for over a month, and they were hard and they were good. Very, very good. I remember that we were not under DOD rules concerning the consumption of alcohol, and we had money to buy our own food, and we were pretty sick of MREs. So we were able to go in the local economy and start barbecuing food. And as that smell waffled through the Green Zone, we had all these troopers come up to us, and they're keeping us alive. There's still a lot of insurgents, a lot of rounds flying, and these kids are protecting us with their lives. And we had no problem feeding them hamburgers and soda. So I had a lot of respect for these kids who didn't have the ability to bathe for a month at a time. Living out, doing a hard job, and they did it superbly.
Well, I'm glad you came out of it unscathed, sir, because, we wouldn't have you now if you didn't. And everything you've done, along your career has been, all for the better good of everything that's been coming out. It's not something that's, speaked about often, about people's careers and what they did beforehand and what they've went through. And my hat's off to you, sir, because you have been through a lot more than I have. I went to Iraq once, and I was on a convoy team too, but nothing so much as, all the stuff that you were involved with. But mostly it's like, if my next question, like getting into like the nitty gritty, what do you think like the biggest blind spots in intelligence is right now, as far as everything that's going on in the community, at large, the UFO community? What's the blind spots like regarding intelligence? Like, are we just like, trying to put it, you know what I mean? Like it's a strange question to ask. Like, is there blind spots in intelligence that we're not looking at that we should be looking?
Well, let me get there. Okay. So when I got back, they had the Intelligence Reform Act. Congress went back and said, what happened? Why did we have a 9/11? Why didn't the FBI and the national intelligence community worked together to understand the
Yeah.
developing threat from Al-Qaeda. So they established the ODNI. Some of the people I'd worked for and supported when I was in Iraq, you had the first ambassador after CPA Bremer left was Ambassador Negroponte, and then his chief of staff was a guy named Pat Kennedy. And Pat Kennedy was like number 3 at state later on. So I ended up working for Pat Kennedy when I was there later on in my tour after Orha and was dissolved, and they stood up the Coalition Provisional Authority. So came back a few years later. They're forming this thing called the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. Okay. The CIA had always had this thing called the Community Management Staff. So the director of CIA kind of had 2 jobs. Mm-hmm. He ran the Central Intelligence Agency, which is the functional manager for HUMINT. On the other hand, he organized and he managed the entire intelligence community, and he had a special staff. And primarily focused on trying to integrate what they call the military intelligence program and the national intelligence program, and then ensure that all the collection supported both war plans, DOD and their needs, and policymakers, the national command authorities, and the intel stuff. So competing requirements, and this CMS organization was supposed to reconcile and be a neutral, office that would allocate resources, because there's only so much time, so much bandwidth, and so much money. The Intel Reform Act changed that. They established the Office of ODNI. I was asked to compete for a position, and I became the first chief of staff for the intelligence community, chief information officer. Wow. So that's how I left, and the organization I was with at DISA was going to become part of NSA at Fort Meade. I live in Virginia, and I did not want to go to Fort Meade. So I could stay in Virginia and go to work for this other organization. And I did that. So and then at ODNI, one of the neat things is there are many different jobs you can work in ODNI. You can also, as part of the joint duty assignment, you can apply and be selected for other assignments as an affiliate working at, say, the National Reconnaissance Office or NSA or NGA. Mm-hmm. And I had the opportunity to do that a few times. Nice. So I really got an appreciation for the different ends. I spent time at DIA, primarily doing collection. For a while, we had a joint collection coordination office. I was working there. When I was at CIA, I had worked with the director of intelligence. And then I was a managing editor for what they thing called Intelligence Today. You may have heard of The Wire. Yeah. And that is a website where we publish intelligence at all classification levels. So we would go out, we become aware of the intelligence needs. Where was the NSC? Where were the policy makers? What was the next interagency coordination policy meeting? What are they looking at? And then we could anticipate their needs. And often I would get calls saying, hey, we need something on this country, this region, this subject, this person. And then I would go out to the directors of intelligence in the different agencies and say, what do you have? I'd like to publish something on this topic in the next 72 hours. And then we had an editorial process, and we would publish at the required classification level. But an incredible job to do that. And that's where I became more familiar with the presidential daily brief process and how those are coordinated, where the demand signal comes from, and how the community works together to address the information requirements of senior policymakers. So a little bit of that. On the technical side, I did 2 tours at the National Geospatial-Intelligence Agency. They're doing the GeoInt mission. They're doing the mapping mission. They're doing precision timing and navigation. Just a huge diversity
Oh, yeah.
of services that they provide. So the first job I had there, I was the director of integration. My job, or our job, because I didn't do it by myself. I had an incredible team of engineers, scientists, and military personnel. So there would be a new payload on a satellite. It could be electro-optical. It could be hyperspectral sensor. It could be radar imaging. But what we would have to do is, now it's in orbit, so we would have to commission it in orbit. So we'd be doing the on-orbit testing and acceptance. So you have to calibrate. So there's a lot of work that we would do to calibrate these sensors before we could put those sensors into production, put them online, so people could start putting requirements against those sensors in space. So we did that work. We did a lot of work on how did the community task requirements against it. As you know, normally requirements overwhelm capacity.
Oh, yeah.
And, at one time, we probably had about 9,000 precision images from space a day. I'm sure today we're over 500,000. So the capacity has really, really grown. And we had to adopt AI and machine processing. Unlike the Chinese, we can't afford to hire tens of thousands of images, scientists. We do that with automation, and we became very, very good at it. And we had a superb staff that did that. And a lot of the algorithms, a lot of the AI tools that would allow us to exploit this huge library of information, to make sense and to develop intelligence. So we did that. Probably 10 years later, I did another tour there. And now I'm in the regional shop. So I was the mission manager for both Southwest, South Asia, which is Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, that area of the world. And then for a while, I had Middle East, which is, Iraq, that area of the world. So I was the senior person in charge of requirements and collection and analysis for that area of the world. So you would work with a lot of interagency coordination entities to make sure that GEOINT complemented HUMINT and all source, and other technical MASET, so we could give the intelligence, the analysis to our policymakers and the DoD to support their efforts.
Yes.
So did that for a number of years. And then I did it for about 3 years. As part of that job, I was always recruiting officers to do 6 months or 1 year tours in both Iraq and Syria and in Afghanistan, because we had to have people on the ground to support the operators and intel community there. And so for 3 years I did that. And when President Trump did the Doha agreement, signed that agreement with the Taliban, there was an interagency team put together that was assigned to enforce and ensure Taliban compliance with that agreement.
Oh, okay.
So I was part of a group that did that. So I had spent a lot of time and was very familiar with the Taliban, the account, the agreement, what our allies thought. So when this happened, I felt I knew more about the account. We were transitioning. We didn't know when I left if who was going to win the next election, and I felt that it was my turn to go. So I was the next officer downrange, and you wear two hats when you're there. One hat at the time you worked for Resolution Support, which was the 4-star mission there at the time. And it was a General Scott Miller, who was an incredible man who spent like the last 3 years of his life there building relationship with senior Afghan officials. trying to bring that war to a satisfactory conclusion. And then I worked for Ambassador Wilson, who actually came off retirement to be the ambassador there in Iraq as we were, working our way through the Doha Agreement. So one hat, and I was working for the ambassador, and the other hat, I was working for DOD, and I was supporting Resolute Support, all they were doing, and supporting NATO as well. So I did that. I was there when the country collapsed and was abandoned by President Biden. Was personally involved in the destruction of a lot of DOD locations. Demilitarizing, sanitizing. And the first time in my life, I assisted in the destruction of a multi-billion-dollar embassy there in Kabul. I'd never done anything like that.
Oh,
We did the emergency destruction. We evacuated our friends and allies.
wow.
It was, we were destroying so much stuff. We ran out of thermite grenades. So one of the war stories I'll get back is, so the consulate was controlling the serial that my team would fly to the airport and then out of the country and be evacuated. And I had told, Admiral Vesey was in charge of evacuation at that time, and Ambassador Wilson, that I would stay in country as long as I had comm and I could produce intelligence to support that. When my comms were cut off, at that time, I became a burden. Okay. The team and I became another set of mouths to feed and protect. So when we couldn't do our job of producing intelligence at that point, we elected to evacuate. So I was there on the 15th is when I evacuated. So I was at the embassy. I was waiting for our serial to be called and no comms. And I decided, the Marines had already gone through my spaces and, put the big red X saying that we had sanitized and we were free to go. And I assisted the other organizations at the embassy in the destruction of their property and their spaces. So, it was getting kind of lonely around the embassy. There weren't a lot of people there, a lot of chaos outside the walls.
Oh, yeah.
So I decided I was going to walk over to the air management office at the embassy. And I walked in there, and there was a local hire Afghan, and the look on his face was like someone had kicked his dog. All the Americans were gone, and I think he had realized he was being abandoned. The look of despair on that man's, face. So I was able to get a number from him. I called the people coordinated the airlift. I remember they said, "Tim, where are you?" I said, "I'm at the embassy waiting for a serial to be called." "Tim, you got to get out of there now." So we got our team. At that time, we had some special operators were flying in. We got together, reassembled, and for those who probably served there in Kabul, they had a soccer stadium. And we were using as the LZ to do the evacuation of the military headquarters, RS, and the embassy. Well, our ambassador had given security guarantees to a lot of the friendly missions and embassies there. So we had a lot of foreign personnel that we were evacuating as well.
Yeah.
So, there was a lot of abandoned, up-armored,
It was chaos.
Yeah, it was just absolute chaos. But we finally got out of there. I remember I got on a 47, and I was right next to the tail gunner. Got some good pictures of flying out of there. We got to the airport, and it was chaos. It was absolutely chaos. Had lost control. That was not the place the DOD wanted to do the NEO. When they started planning for the NEO in like May and April of 2021, when Fifth Fleet sent out their Marine, the Marine One Star to do the survey, he went around to the different locations. Kandahar was going to be the base in the south, and then we were going to use, Bagram in the north. And Bagram had a great security perimeter. It was continuous. We had a lot of gates. It was a paired, but do both mass casualties or a huge evacuation with the gates and control measures they had in place. President Biden decided to abandon Biden. We no longer had that available. If you had been to Harakazai International Airport, HKI as they called it, the main runway flew right into the mountains. It was surrounded by hills owned by the Taliban. You had urban encroachment. You had the city grew right up to the walls. There was no continuous perimeter. 5 different countries owned part of the perimeter around that base. It was not the place to do an evacuation. It just wasn't. But that's what we had. And I remember I wrote an email to the Commandant of the Marine Corps because I was so impressed with the professionalism and, surprised me as a Marine to see the compassion, the discipline that these Marines showed. And you had all these refugees, these Afghans having the worst day of their life, the worst week of their life, fleeing with what they could carry to an uncertain future with chaos all around them. I remember we were all kitted up. The team and I got on a plane. They threw us on the back of a C-17. And we're all armed and we're looking around. We don't know who's on the plane with us. And I was kind of concerned that somebody cooking himself off at altitude. But I remember we got in the airplane, and if you've been in the back of a C-17, there's no windows for you. You can't see what's going on. And we got on the plane, and I thought we were spending a lot of time on the ground. And I kept on hearing these helicopter noises. I thought that was kind of strange. And then we have the aircraft commander comes on the internet or on the intercom, and he says, "Hey, we've lost control. There's Afghans running all over the runway and the taxiway, and we can't move." So we finally, we heard the helicopters. We finally start rolling. When I land in Al Udeid, airport, so I'm in Qatar. We get there. And I finally look at a CNN monitor. I saw what happened. From inside the C-17s, we couldn't see what was going on that day. But the security personnel had lost control of the airport. It was an absolute mess. Things weren't much better when we got there because you had the huge deluge of mankind arrives out there, and they're trying to figure out who's who. You've deployed. We had amnesty barrels.
Yep.
Well, you would be amazed what was showing up in the amnesty barrels.
Oh, God.
The munitions and weapons. But we finally got back, and this was in the time of COVID. And I had flown into that country. I didn't fly into that country. I was flying on a black passport, and I went into Afghanistan on government air. So I didn't have a visa, but I had people in that country that were able to get me an exit visa, and I promptly got out of there as quick as I could. And I do want to give some credit to the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security, Mr. Moultrie, Honorable Moultrie. He realized that it had been a complete disaster, and he wanted to document what occurred, why our memories were fresh, and more importantly, we had access to the databases and the classified reporting. Okay. And we spent about a month capturing from an intelligence perspective what we saw, what we reported, and then the facts on the ground. And one of the things that was often used to brief the president was a placemat that kind of showed who controlled what province, who controlled the border crossing, and the main supply routes, the MSRs.
Yeah.
So we kind of showed day by day what happened in Iraq, or excuse me, in Afghanistan. And I'll give them credit, the courage to document that horrible embarrassment, probably the worst U.S. foreign policy in my lifetime, where we abandoned our allies.
I definitely couldn't believe it when I saw the news and what happened and the pullout. I was like, oh my, like I was retired at that point and I'm like, look at this.
Yeah. A lot of us lost friends. A lot of our friends lost limbs. And a lot of people were questioning if it was worth it. To the credit, one of the things that ODNI and CIA did, we had so many officers that served there. On the anniversary of that collapse, we actually, as a senior executive, we actually got together with some mental health professionals, and we kind of got together and had like a seminar, a meeting where people could come in and express their emotions and their regrets over what happened. There was a lot of emotion. There was a lot of anger on that foreign policy, disaster. And I hope, we capture the truth and we put it on record. So years from now, when we're all dust, historians can look back and have the facts on, that horrible sequence of decisions and horrible outcomes that was a result of the Biden administration decision to abandon Afghanistan. But I was short-toured. I needed a job.
Yeah.
I came back after that after action. There was a office at ODNI. So there is a 3-star billet. That is the military advisor to the Director of National Intelligence. Mm-hmm. And I knew some people in the offices. So they made me the military advisor to the DNI's military advisor. And I ended up working for an incredible human being, a Lieutenant General Jeff Cruz, who is the DAMA. And until recently, he was the director of DIA. So Jeff gave me a job, and it was him who actually came into my office one day and asked me to, to apply and, think about applying to become the deputy director for AARO. I knew nothing about the AARO mission. In my intelligence career, I did weapons of mass destruction, nuclear, and I did terrorism and some regional intelligence work. I knew nothing about UAPs or UFOs and never really thought about it, but I did have a collection background. At the executive level, I help edit and not produce, but to field and publish very, very high-level intel support policymaking. So, but that prior collection and analytical experience, I had the right skill set, and the Director of National Intelligence really wanted a senior intelligence service officer to serve as the deputy to tie in, the DOD and the Title 50 effort, because the wisdom of Congress, they actually established it where the director was going to be a scientist that came from DOD, and the deputy director was going to be a Title 50 guy who came from the national intelligence community. So we could work together to kind of solve this. So it was a good design. And I want to talk a little bit about the sincere effort that the government made, to truly understand UAP. So as the military started to feel more capable digital radars with much more sophistication and sensitivity, they started to detect, more bogeys and unknowns.
Yes.
And then there was a lot of reports from aviators to Congress where they saw things that they didn't quite understand. There were some whistleblowers and some people who testify under oath about government retrieval programs, about the U.S. government conducting experiments on alien craft. And by alien, I'm talking extraterrestrial.
Yes.
Or reverse engineering capabilities. Congress wanted to know the facts. And in the 2023 National Defense Authorization Act, they established AARO, gave it a very robust budget, and most importantly, gave it the authority to pursue UAP information, do investigation at any classification level.
Okay.
And I want your guests and your audience to know that nobody told me no. Okay. When we were conducting an investigation, either it was a referral from Congress, we had a person who contacted AARO, through the secure reporting mechanism,
Mm-hmm.
we would pursue it. We
Okay.
would pursue an investigation. And there was only one time, and it was in the publishing of volume 1 of the historical report, where we had a claim of reverse engineering, and there was a picture of a R&D test of a space platform
Okay.
that was actually observed by a person who was legally present at the test site, who claimed it was an alien spaceship.
Okay.
So it kind of got our attention. What is this? And when we finally got the test director and the 3-layer agency, and we saw what it is, we completely understood why it could be identified as an alien spacecraft.
Okay.
Because if you grew up watching, Star Trek and scientific movie, that's what you would expect it to be.
Okay.
And it was amazing to see this. And we thought that would be an incredible image to put in the report. And the report was published at 3 classification levels. So there was one for the public.
Mm-hmm.
There was one at the TS-SI level,
Mm-hmm.
but there was one at the SAP CAP level.
Yeah.
And that went to those who know, primarily the Gang of 8, the senior leadership in Congress. So there's some very, very sensitive information there. And I wanted a picture from a 3-layer agency to put in there. Now, they're very protective because this is one of their crown jewels.
Okay.
Did not want to give it to me. And when I was the acting director, Sean had retired, and I was the one doing the coordination to get the historical report published. I had an agency that was really dragging their feet, not being very helpful. I'm getting a lot of no's, and one of the neat things in the org chart is there's solid lines to the Deputy Secretary of Defense and the Principal Director of National Intelligence. That's who you work for.
Yeah.
So every 2 weeks, I'm meeting with Honorable Hicks to brief her on the findings of this organization.
Okay.
So at the end of the meeting, as usual, she says, "Tim, is there anything I can do for you? Do you need anything?" And I said, "Well, ma'am, I'm having a little bit of trouble getting." Why in the meeting, she turns to her Marine aide, a brigadier, and tells her to get that director on the phone.
Oh, wow.
And later on, when we get the individual on the phone, she basically expressed to him, gift him what he needs.
Nice.
So there was a sincere effort by the administration, to get the information, not to hold information from AARO. AARO would intend report that information to those that had a need to know in the clearances.
I think I'm getting it now, because there was a story when congressmen said they went to a gate and they said they weren't allowed in this gate and everything else. But if they're not cleared to know, if they're not part of the Gang of 8, then they wouldn't have clearance to go in there and see that, right? So if lower congressmen come in, they'll be like, "You're not cleared to see this."
Well, AARO reports to 12 different House and Senate committees, which is a huge amount of committees to report to. There's a lot of work to do that.
Yeah.
It's the leadership of those committee who determines who gets read at. If you're not on that committee of jurisdiction, you don't have a need to know, and you're not going to be read into the program. And that could be very frustrated for elected officials who are not read into everything our government does. We compartmentalize.
Yes.
And we have to do that to protect these very sensitive programs. I know it's frustrating, but I can tell you, despite all the speculation, and sometimes people have testified under oath that the government had recovered and reverse engineered alien spacecraft, we found no evidence of it. Now, we found evidence that your government recovers materials.
Okay.
We do that. We have highly trained people who recover materials. There's a whole program in the government to coordinate what we want to go, calculate risks, and then coordinate the execution of the mission. We do that. And it's done and it's coordinated at the highest level of the government. And it's protected with both special access or controlled access programs, and very few people know what they're doing. There's a reason for it. Everything that AARO researched while I worked there, we found no evidence of anything that was recovered that wasn't from this Earth.
Okay.
Now, there's space debris.
That's what
everything we discovered, had a terrestrial origins. Okay.
Okay.
We do that, as you know. Often, when you have a re-entry space vehicle, some of its components can be very dangerous based off the fuel or the nuclear plutonium on board that space. And DOD and the IC, they have people trained. We can come in with the logistics, the command and controls, and the special science.
Quick reaction force.
Exactly. And you do that. But for all the cases that we investigated, and we had access to everything, I remember on the historic report, there were 41 SAPs and CAPs that were claimed that were dealing with the recovery of UAP.
Okay.
We researched every one of them and never found a UAP. We found space material, but never UAP.
Okay.
Those were all terrestrial. In the cases where AARO spent millions of dollars to go up and identify materials. So there were materials the government had or private groups had claiming were of alien origins that were given to AARO to investigate. In every case, those materials came from this solar system and this planet.
So with the isotope ratios and all of that, it was the same.
Correct. And we worked with Department of Energy. We tend to work with Oak Ridge. A lot of the labs we work with were part of the Manhattan program. Sandia, Livermore, Oak Ridge. So we're talking some really credible people with some very, very sophisticated equipment.
Oh, yeah.
And we would try to publish those findings at the unclassified level wherever we could, and we did that. And I believe if you go to the website, you'll see some of the reports. But everything that we investigated came from this planet.
Okay.
One of the things, that AARO got a lot of criticism for is AARO is primarily concerned in national security. Okay.
Yeah.
When I was a student and military schools.
Is it national security and air safety, both them together?
Well, air safety is not our job. We're looking at the national security aspect of it.
Oh, okay.
And it's more than just air. It's all domains. So it's space, it's maritime, and then it's in the air domain. And we worked in all three domains. But that's how I can put this here.
Take your time, sir.
No, it's to defend everything is to defend nothing. And that came from Frederick the Great. I remember that quote when I was in one of the military schools I attended. We are most concerned with unidentified craft, operate in proximity of critical infrastructure, or operational forces.
Like the New Jersey thing that happened earlier was a bunch of stuff that was put up in the air that was very advanced.
Exactly. We can go back to that, but that was our bias. So I know there was a lot of infatuation. A lot of people are going back in time, looking at cases 20, 30 years ago. It was frustrating for us. The Nimitz is a great case.
Yeah.
AARO exists today because some of the failures of that. So there was no requirement in the Department of Defense to report and retain evidence data.
Yeah.
Well, AARO worked with the Joint Staff, announced a direction out there to the department, DOD, when you have a UAP incident, you must report it and you must protect the data.
Yeah.
Okay. We've removed the stigma of reporting UAP contact or observation or incidents. At one time, you were jeopardizing your security, clearance or your flight status to report a UAP. We encourage government officials to report the contact. We need to know. In today's environment where you have autonomous lethal UASs, okay, or maritime systems that can track you, that can hunt you and can attack you, we cannot allow something we do not understand to operate close proximity to critical infrastructure operating. We just can't do it.
No, and they're shutting down base airspace and all this
primary concern. And also, when we fielded sensors, it was a lot easier to field collection capability on government property.
Okay.
We could protect it. Okay. We could also, a lot of it was restricted airspace. You had fences, you had security people. So we could protect and we could do some pretty amazing things to try to understand, and detect UAP. And we've had, the fielding of capability where we've done almost up to a year surveillance at sites, trying to understand what normal is. There's been great collaboration with Department of Energy. I'm working with Weather, NOAA. I'm working with DOD, Department of Transportation, both the maritime and the aviation side, the FAA, to use their data to work with Department of Homeland Security, the Air and Maritime Operations Center that Customs and Border Protection runs, because they have sensors along the border and at our coasts, and they pick up anomalies. So the FAA is tracking, the national, aerospace, commercial and civil air. Often or sometimes they will pick up things they don't understand. Those are the anomalies that we want to understand. There is a new digital radars, a next generation radar system. And I think there's over 150 that's been fielded across Alaska, Hawaii, and North America. These things can pick up molecules icing over. Pretty sensitive stuff. We're working with MIT, okay, and the Air Force Research Laboratory. We were able to put a requirement, say, if we see an object traveling or operating in this manner, so we can define the characteristics of a UAP, okay? It's not squawking IFF and not in the ASD, non-cooperative targets. We want that data set here. Okay. So we are working in the federal government to get that data sent to us. The ground surveillance system, these hyperspectral systems I've mentioned in interviews before, called Gremlin. It's a combination of active radar and passive hyperspectral system that's looking up at the stars. So we're looking for those anomalies. And what we want to do at the edge, if this is, we can confirm that that's a scheduled airline or that's a bird or a bat. That's not the type of data I want to move. So we want to make sure that this fits our definition of UAP. And let me give you another war story. When I first got this job as the deputy, I just said, well, I'm going to go back to the mothership. So I went to CIA's S&T. There's a committee, and you can bring them hard targets. You can talk to the scientists, the Q guys, the CIA. And I said, hey, I'm the deputy director, and then I was the acting director of AARO. And I said, what do you have in your inventory or techniques or, that we could adopt to identify, build tracks of these UAPs? And the first things they asked me and said, Tim, what's the signature of what you're trying to collect? And I said, I can't define it because it's so wide. It's hyperspectral. It's the behavior, it's the appearance, the speed. It's different. So that was a little bit of a challenge, but we were able to define it and program our systems and applying AI against it. And what we're trying to do in near real time is to detect these anomalous events. So as you know, we have space surveillance things. There's a system, looking at basically what's approaching our planet. So if you're looking up there with some type of space wall, and you've got something that deorbits and enters the atmosphere, there's a lot of people interested in that.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. A lot of people are looking for that, want to make sure it's not a reentry warhead. Okay. So there are procedures to do that. Well, AARO worked with the space community, the Space Force and Spacecom, and the other agencies that support that mission. And we came up with a definition of what a UAP in space is. So they're concerned about reentering, space debris and weapons.
Yeah.
We're interested in UAPs, which right now, they say that's not a threat. We don't care. Well, that's the stuff that we want to analyze. So there was a war game out in Colorado, to play through these scenarios, to help us define the back office IT infrastructure.
Okay.
Think about the massive amount of data that comes off these sensors, okay, that has to get somewhere so we can apply AI and machine learning.
Yeah. It's like terabytes of data.
A lot of data. And we learned a lot about it. We learned a lot about processing this data. But you got the data, it's coming from space. Now there's a track. It's coming into someone's backyard. And that's one of the things I like about both the IC and DoD. You have people responsible for geographic areas.
Okay.
So in the military, you have COCOMs.
Yeah.
And the COCOM owns everything, water, space. Well, we work with them. And when we've got a track, we want to know who has that track, and you pass custody. So we've got something we don't understand. It meets the definition of UAP. You want to be able to have pass that track to somebody to say, what is it? And is it a threat? Okay. And then where does it go and what does it do? If it comes down close to, something DOD's trying to protect, we have the means, and AARO was protecting the security personnel of the services to do that initial response, so we could get scientists and operators to the site to do the forensic processing on the site. And when it comes to forensic processing, we learned a lot from the FBI. The FBI actually assisted us when there were claims of physical material left at a UAP incident site, using Department of Justice standards to go in and collect evidence and protect that evidence as if you were going to use it in a prosecution in a federal trial. You curate that evidence. And what that helps us later on is to defend it, to academia and peer review science. We keep it pure. So AARO does that, and we have people on alert that use commercial travel. They have some handheld hyperspectral imaging devices. We normally try to have a rated officer with them. It just always helps because I would say the vast majority of the cases are coming from aviators or ISR operators.
Now, would you guys get the cases like, I remember two cases I can remember. One was a case where a space debris, I guess it was a battery, fell through somebody's roof in Florida in their garage or something. And then one was in a couple states over. It was a little rock or something, a meteorite had gone through this guy's garage too, and it was like older than the earth, I guess they found out.
I know both those cases. We did not. We knew there are people who do that.
Okay, so we
know people. That'd be a meter or space debris or space debris. A lot of times you understand what it is that's re-entering, and you can calculate probably what's going to make it to the Earth. And maybe that your subscribers don't. There is actually like a satellite parking area in the southern Indian Ocean,
A
which is
satellite
far
parking
from
area.
civilization and land, and that's where they try to put this stuff down. And your government knows a lot about the sound of things coming into the ocean, both directions, being launched out or coming in. And so, and as you know, there's hydrophones. We're listening to the oceans. There's a little bit of bias in the maritime world, the subsurface world. They're interested in the sound of steel moving through water, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
And they're very secretive and very compartmentalized. And to tell you the truth, we didn't have as much success working in the maritime environment as we did in the air or in space. So the reason for it is we were able to apply geospatial techniques, analytical defense, and collection tools in aerospace. The vast majority of the reporting was coming from ISR systems.
Okay.
And we've got a lot of experience exploiting that. And I would actually, out at Dayton, Ohio, at the National Air and Space Intelligence Center and the National Space Intelligence Center, there's a center that AARO funds, and all they do, I would call it the UAP Center of Excellence. Okay. And that's where they're applying geospatial analytic tools to understand these cases. So a lot of the models,
like the comet also that's coming 3i Atlas, they're probably watching that as well.
That's it. They do a lot of that. So we have a lot of expertise there. I would say space is the next place we've had most success. And where we want to do more is in the maritime, but that's highly compartmentalized and very, very sensitive. And one of the things I got to say about the mix of scientists, we had scientists from the Navy, from the Air Force, that were coming in to help us in both the air or maritime or even the space domain. And we had a wonderful relationship with the commander of U.S. Space, Spacecom. So we were working with those responsible for those mission areas. But it's a small team. As I had mentioned, we had great cooperation from all parts of the government. This is a mission large enough for all of us, and it's a team sport.
Yeah.
AARO, the U.S. government doesn't have all the expertise, to solve every UAP case. But there are legitimate academic and scientific interest groups that do. And I know that the current director really wanted to work with those that could bring new insights and techniques and procedures and share them with us. We had actually discussed with NASA trying to have a public challenge where we were going to get a UAP case that was not sensitive at all, but actually provide that like a challenge to the public and say, hey, this is a case that occurred here. This is what we know about it. What do you think? And I know that John was working to do that before I left AARO in the spring. But there's a lot of great work that could be done there. There's also a frustration that there's a lot of work that AARO does that never gets reported publicly.
Okay? Oh, I understand that.
We are a national, we're really concerned with national security. Often we're looking for UAPs. We don't find UAPs in every case. Okay, we may find an adversary system. So,
what did you personally see, like in your cases or briefings, that stood out to you the most as like, what is this?
I think I had mentioned that in a couple of interviews before. The black triangles.
Okay.
Because we know that is a proven design for stealth that's been fielded. And when we have trained security personnel or aviators are telling us they've got an unknown object, a UAP, with these characteristics, performing in this manner in a very sensitive place, that bothers me. Okay. Now, when that happens, it's going to be reported, but it's not going to be made public because we don't want to tell the adversary that
we saw your toys.
We want to provide feedback. And I think these are systems provided, that are have a man in or on the loop based off some of the behaviors that we've been able to document. somebody's operating these craft.
Okay.
Another thing that was really weird, and we got consistent reporting from legitimate sources, is the fiery orbs. A lot of fiery orbs in places they should not be.
Okay.
What is it? I think it's a form of stealth. Talking to some of the the scientists, there's two ways, two principal schools to achieve stealth. One is the shape and materials to reflect or bend or absorb RF energy.
Mm-hmm.
The other one is to build a force field.
Like a plasma almost around it.
Exactly. Now, we've tried both. It takes a lot of energy. Maybe someone's had a breakthrough in energy. To have something, relatively small to be able to generate a force field like that. Another thing that we saw was developments in optical stealth. So you probably saw the first Arnold Predator movie.
Yeah, I'm thinking about the jellyfish one now.
Eyes, and it's kind of that shimmery effect.
That's like that jellyfish video that they had in Iraq.
Well, we know what that one was.
Yeah.
I want to go back to that and talk a little bit about declassification, but that is real.
Okay.
There's ways to bend and deflect photons. Mm-hmm. You can do it now. Has someone achieved a low-cost, low-weight, high-performing application that can be put on, a vehicle? Does that account for some of the shimmering events that witnesses report? I don't know, but when I talked to our scientists, they thought that could be probable. Is that a form of stealth, optical stealth?
Okay.
Let's talk a little bit about declassification.
Yeah.
One of the problems we had with historical cases is someone would leak a classified video, something that was taken with a force protection camera or ISR system,
and had the actual thing still on it.
They captured something going by the orbs going by or whatever. That was always very, very difficult to declassify. We were at war for 20 years.
Okay.
And we had these fobs that came in. Often the fobs were staffed by guard units or reserve units. And they were there for 6 months, 9 months, or a year. And when we finally pinned down that leaked video was taken in 2006, and we think it was taken at this fob at this location, now we have to go back and say, okay, who commanded that fob or that base?
Oh, God.
And then you have to go back to them and show them the video. If we can find the commanders and say, is there anything in this field of view that would compromise national security that you think we need to protect? Very, very hard when people are leaking videos, okay? Another thing that was difficult for us to do. So we'd have a case, and one of the things we'd always have to do when we ruled out it was a bird, it was a plane.
Yeah.
Blue force deconfliction. Now we have to go out to all the R&D community and said, were you testing something at this time in this place?
Okay.
And you had to be very, very specific because not really willing to volunteer that information.
Yeah, they'll either say yes or no. They're not going to tell you what they were testing.
Yeah, sometimes you've got to be very specific. So that was very, very time consuming.
Okay.
You only have one chance to declassify something. You only get to do it once, okay? And there's all types of checks. There's very elaborate procedures to do it. Remember, these videos, they were not classified by AARO.
Yeah.
There's some operator that classified it. So we have to go to the originator or the derivative classifier to say, is it okay for AARO to declassify that? And they'll give us, the conditions on how we do that. That takes a long time. Now, I'll give credit to Congress I think it was in the 25 or maybe the 24 NDAA, where they actually directed the U.S. government to send all of its UAP and UAS or UAP and UFO unclassified information to NARA, where it could be made discoverable and U.S. Public could access it. On the classified material within the Department of Defense, the DODIC had asked AARO to do the security reviews and recommend the declassification. And AARO had hired a large staff, and that is their full-time job as we get these reports from the community to go through and recommend declassification and then pass those materials to NARA. So you're going to see more and more material be declassified.
So how long does it normally take from
sometimes it could take up to a year.
Okay.
And I want to say another thing that's kind of challenging. So when AARO's out there and we take data from different systems, we're taking data from air traffic control. We are taking data from targeting radars, from ring doorbells, from space surveillance. You get all this data and you aggregate it.
Okay.
Well, when you aggregate it, it can drive the classification up.
True.
Okay. So often when we do that, we may find things that we can't share with the public because it would reveal sources and methods. And we have been at national security sites with our data, and our people are cleared. And we even had range control come out and put up netting to block our sensors from sensing, or imaging part of that base.
Oh, wow.
Okay, even when we're out there, there's things that we can't image. And to think about it, you could have a foreign country testing.
Yeah.
Okay. There could be an issue of privacy of U.S. citizens. We are the government. So we follow those rules. But there's been a great development as we look at the UAS threat, the drone threat, where we are combining sensors that AARO has developed, these hyperspectral sensors, active, both active and passive. You combine them with the counter-drone technologies together. They're looking for drones. We're looking for UAPs. They don't find a drone. They got a track they don't understand. We want them to send that to us.
Okay.
And we work really well together at mission speed to start transferring data back and forth. It quickly becomes a huge data challenge, and we've got to process this with computers and use AI because it's a relatively small office and there's a massive amount of data.
Yeah.
Another thing that the current director is doing, he had asked about some basic baseline. Okay, we know what the situation is at national security sites because we're watching. You always hear about the aliens' interest and nuclear sites. Well, why do we have so many detections at nuclear sites? Because we protect them. Okay, but
they're hard in places.
Yeah, what are we doing at places we don't protect? What's normal?
Okay.
And we've got a couple of things. So we actually work with a part of CIA that had a lot of low-cost networked sensors that we could work with the Bureau of Land Management and Department of Interior at these different, fire observation sites and lightnings and weather sites and actually put them and have them look at the stars. What's up there? What does normal look like? So that fielding was starting to occur when I left. So we get a better understanding of baseline. John was very, very interested in data set and was actually investing. There are some private out in in Albuquerque. There is a center where we had an individual that was collecting UFO UAP records that the school district, Albuquerque, actually took over and gave them a government building, part of the school district, and they have an archive, a library.
Oh, wow.
AARO is going to work with them to help them digitize that using NARA standards so that information could be found or be made discoverable by researchers.
Oh, wow.
And then we could use it to kind of, collaborate and to correlate. So when we have a case, one of the natural things you say is who else reported this, who else may have data that would help us understand the case. And a lot of that is we start getting other collection in that doesn't come from DOD will start to degrade that collection bias we have with national security sites. We were working with the airline pilots, associations, because they're up there flying around, often above the weather, and they see things. Yeah. Well, they see things. We want them to tell us.
Yeah.
Okay. We want those reports. We got to remove the stigma. More data is better.
That's the problem now too. That's why they went to UAP from UFO to destigmatize it.
Yeah. You see something you don't understand, report it. Give the data to somebody who has, a remit to study it. And that's the amazing thing about the wisdom of Congress. They created AARO, and unlike Project Blue Book, for the majority of existence, was run by a captain buried in the bowels of the Air Force. This is an organization that works, at the department level.
Yeah.
And actually has guidance from senior people, in oversight. If they see things, they've got to report it. I do want to talk a little bit. I know we're getting kind of run out of time here, but AARO.
It's your floor, sir. Hey, hey, I'm just here listening. I mean, you have a very, very, very huge career that we could spend 3, 4, 5 hours on. What now? Just getting into the nitty gritty. What now? This is my feelings. Okay. I know we were getting a lot of reports on New Jersey about the drones that were over sensitive areas, and a bunch of local police officers were coming out saying, we're not getting the support we need. Is that kind of what we need to work on? That if they need to more support is needed in areas for observation of these things, and because they weren't saying they weren't getting, some of these places weren't getting support, for visual optimization and cameras and anything to track them,
Well, the likelihood of a UAP incident occurring is probably not going to be on federal property. It's state, local, tribal. Okay. And one of the things that AARO was doing was to provide training and materials and capability to state, local, tribals. We wanted to give them best practices for UAP investigations and response. Because they're the first responders. That's what we wanted. So we have that. Something that AARO's been working on for over a year is a public reporting mechanism. Good. And it got slowed down a little bit with the new administration because there were some forms that have to be approved by GSA.
Okay.
So when people see things, they can report it to AARO.
Okay.
So all of that is coming. A little bit about the incidents, last winter that occurred in New Jersey, New York. Yeah. Some of our time, we weren't tasked to look at it, but some of our scientists did. Everything that we looked at was a scheduled airline or an actual Type 1, Type 2 UAS that was operating. And the ones that we saw were operating legally in accordance with FAA guidelines. People just looked up and realized there's a lot of stuff flying around at night. When I was in the UK last, I got a brief from their intelligence and the Ministry of Defense, and they had something very similar happen to them. And almost all the cases tended to be lawfully operated aircraft flying around at night. So we're going to see more of that. I like the President's Golden Dome initiative.
Yes.
We start tying in sensors. Mm-hmm. For a long time, the United States was protected by friendly neighbors and large oceans.
Yeah.
If you look at the evolution of warfare and what's happened, between Iran and Israel or between Ukraine and Russia, there's a new paradigm out there. We're using, uncrewed systems with great autonomy and lethality. And that's coming here. And we've already seen it with some of the cartels. I was down working with CBP, and I was in El Paso. And I was stunned that you could go online, you could order illicit drugs, and they will fly them to you within 100 kilometers of the border and drop them off with the UAS. Just amazing, the development in these UAS systems, what people call drones. And we're going to see more of that. And we have to develop capacity. AARO was asked by the Joint Staff and the Deputy Director or Secretary of Defense to help at the Langley incident. It was about 10 days at the premier, or the only really F-22 NASA base there. And these things, combination of fixed wing and rotary wing, flew unabated in restricted airspace for over a week. And DOD had systems, but the systems DOD developed were designed to operate in a war zone, where we didn't care about disrupting telecommunications, or we could shoot things down. Those systems really couldn't be used in Langley, in Chesapeake, Virginia, in Hampton Roads. They wouldn't work there. And so DOD responded. A lot of capacity was not coordinated. And one of the things that we found is you had DOD systems that were designed to detect, track, and destroy, defeat. But then the next target would pop up and they write over that same recording medium, because they were never designed, to curate evidence, to deliver data that would be delivered to a federal court for a prosecution at the federal level. That was not a design requirement. So when AARO was asked to assist the law enforcement task force to try to understand where did these systems originate, what were they interested in, and where did they egress? So we looked at the available data, and we actually worked with MIT trying to make sense of it. We can't allow that to happen.
No.
And since that time, Northcom and this administration is investing a lot of money, to build credible systems that will track, and defeat where necessary.
Yeah. So when it comes to the science, behind these UAPs, how is the line drawn between science and national defense when you investigate UAPs?
Well, we use a lot of science to try to understand. We have an incident, and it's reported to AARO. AARO gets on site. The first thing we'll do is try to identify all available data. Do interviews as fast as as soon as possible while the memories are still fresh. Get to the sites, and almost like detectives. Who else would be in field of view of this incident? Where else could be there additional information? AARO it's very difficult to conduct real time, because by time it's reported to us, often it's a week late. Now, one of the really great things that we were doing as part of our outreach to the military is we were asking the services for direct liaison. So there's a formal reporting system, but we want that commander, if he's got something, or, and we actually had it. There was a missile launch, and there was some activity that was fouling the range. And we actually got a call. Hey, we've got some stuff, and they thought there was some type of UAS operating, and we were able to get out there quickly to work with them. That was informal, but we appreciated the fact that we could try to get to a site while there was an ongoing UAP incident.
Immediately, because that's the best way to do it.
Now, we don't have planes assigned to us, but in the continental United States, you can fly almost anywhere in 24 hours. We had a pretty robust travel budget, and our guys kept their bags packed. And one of the things that was budgeted and was being fielded is we were actually provided some pretty sophisticated kit to the force protection people, the criminal investigative organizations doing force protection at these sensitive sites, to give them equipment and training, give them basically an SOP to say when, because we can't be everywhere. And what I thought that AARO should work itself out of business.
Okay.
UAP Investigations, I think, is the responsibility of the commander. I don't think there should be a separate organization that just does UAP. You've got something operating in Europe in your AOR that you don't understand. That's your responsibility.
That's true.
To be able to, run it to ground to find out what it is.
That's true.
So we're working towards that. My on-hands experience, and it's been a while now since I've been there with those guys, but a bunch of dedicated Americans from throughout the community. And I do want to give credit to Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, who actually stood up AARO. Sean, a lot of people did not like Sean, but I got to tell you, Sean was pure in the adoption of, scientific procedure. The people he hired, if you thought that there was a supernatural cause to every incident, or you denied that there ever could be a supernatural explanation to an event, you wouldn't be hired. We wanted unbiased people that let the evidence lead to a conclusion.
That's what I do too. You don't let the evidence lead you. You follow the evidence.
And there's a lot of people, there's a lot of hateful people in the business that thought that we should, that AARO should somehow affirm their beliefs. That's not what AARO was established to do.
Yeah, you're there to collect the information.
And we're there to do the analysis and brief leadership on what we think it is.
Exactly.
And I'll give credit to, the current director. John, last time I was on the Hill with him, actually told Congress, hey, there's cases we can't explain. Came public and said, hey, there truly are UAPs. We don't know what they are. And we're working very, very hard, to develop more evidence and to detect them in near real time. But there are things we don't understand. And that took a lot of courage to come out and say we don't know. Yeah. But that's honesty. And I really think, and I've said this many times, that the government doesn't have a monopoly on knowledge or techniques. And I think we should have a team effort. For those who have legitimate science and expertise, we should work together to understand this, because I truly believe it is a national security concern. And that's how I approached it based off my DOD and IC background. So, Jay, I think I may have lost you.
And
you're coming back.
Wow, that was weird. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I don't have video
going
on.
On with that, my computer booted me out of the actual program. That never happened before. So
the first ever. Hey, we need to kind of wrap this up here. I gotta feed my dogs.
You're good. I was just gonna say, I just had a question real quick, and then I'll get to the audience questions. There's not too many,
Sure.
Maybe two, and then. Real quick, what is your assessment of the September 9th congressional hearing and the trajectory of these investigations?
Okay, I'm not sure what happened on September 9th.
Supposed to be the next UAP hearings. Ross Coulthart came out, said they were already confirmed at September 9th, saying 3 firsthand whistleblowers coming out in Congress saying it.
Okay. Here's how I feel, and I'm probably going to offend some people. If somebody has personal firsthand knowledge of a UAP incident, contact AARO, give AARO an opportunity to investigate it.
Okay.
Okay, because there really is. This is a search for the truth. They want to investigate it. They have the means. They have the authority.
So more like don't muddy the waters, go through the right process.
No, they can go to their elected members, but I've been personally offended by people who have monetized this UAB business, or people who have gone before Congress and made these astonishing claims and no evidence.
Okay. And I do. Hey, I'm right there with you because I say a lot of times, put up or shut up.
There many times we had to go out to Nevada, to the test range out there, or went to Dayton with members of Congress looking for the underground, laboratory where we keep the bodies.
Yeah.
Now, if somebody has something legitimate, and I will tell you, when the people have come forward as whistleblowers and are making protected disclosures, we found that the people were credible, they were patriots, and what they conveyed was accurate. What they saw and how they portrayed it to AARO was amazing. And we would take their story, we would write up their statement, we let them, edit the statement before they signed it, and then we would start the inquiry. And often when we went to the site and we got the reports or the video from that experiment or test, what we were able to find is that their descriptions were very, very accurate. Their assessments were often erroneous. They were wrong. They didn't understand what they observed. And in every case that I worked, the people were lawfully present, but they were not witting. They were not part of the test. And I will tell you that our country has some amazing technology. I first went out to Area 51 at the direction of a committee chair who told me I had to get eyes on technology. I was briefed, I'd seen it, and that was inadequate. I had to get out there, see it for myself to truly understand.
Wow.
And there are people that support the base, support, the development of technology, that don't understand everything they observe.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Now, on the other hand, there's clandestine programs that we try to protect where we do things and we do recover things. And we do everything we can to protect the fact that we were there and we have something that looks very mysterious and like we're trying to hide things. Well, we are. But in every case where we had an incident like that was reporting, it was a legitimate program, and most of them dealt with the recovery of foreign technology.
Okay. All right. Well, since you have to go soon, sir, we'll go ahead and do the questions real quick right here. Was it just materials? This is NO. Was it just materials that came from here and not the technology, or both the technology and materials were terrestrial?
We were asked to analyze metal fragments. So it's debris. Is that we were asked. You can hear my hounds in the background.
Yep, that's what my dog picked up her head right here.
I see it. Yeah, so it was metal that we were asked. There was some space debris that we were asked to look like, and it had that classic teardrop effect when you have a re-entering object from space as the heat melts it. It has almost a teardrop type shape, and it was very obvious that this was something that re-entered, that came in from space. It was a piece of metal, but the alloys is something you would expect from a satellite. Okay.
All right. So it was a down material from a satellite.
Correct. It was debris, as we looked at. There was no actual piece of technology or system that we were asked to evaluate.
Okay. But even if a satellite comes down, I mean, some of the technology is still classified,
Oh, absolutely.
So, I mean, you definitely have to get out there. So here's the next one here. I'm not sure about this one. Question: what happened to the physical material that a person that you claimed was escorting AARO and Senator, you said SSCI chairman sent you to Area 51 over it? Did they take it back? I don't understand the question, but
what happened is we got pulled in. A committee chair pulled us in. There was a father-son duo that had some material they claimed that fell. They recovered from a U.S. stealth aircraft.
Okay.
and they wanted the government to buy it back.
Yep, I remember that.
And why would we buy something back? It came from a government material. It's government. The government owns it. Um, when it started to sound like extortion, we just turned it over to the FBI. And as soon as he said that the material had come from a U.S. aircraft, that's not a UAP. It's not AARO's mission at that point.
Okay.
But there was an incident where the same individual provided an image of an advanced concept aircraft that was very similar to an actual platform
Uh-oh.
that the senator was concerned about. And we
Okay.
had to go up and say, is this something that's been photoshopped? Is this, is our government actually working on an aircraft that looks or appears similar to this photo? The individual claimed that they had developed technology to be able to detect it. It got very, very strange. And I thought the members should be protected. And I thought it was unprofessional for his staff to allow these individuals to have access to the senator.
I would think so too, because of the fact that, I'm sorry, but if I came to you, Tim, and I said, this is from an aircraft, well, guess what? It doesn't belong to me anymore. It's yours. Like, it's the government's. It's automatic, And then I guess he claimed that he could defeat stealth and all this other stuff.
Correct. And it really wasn't a UAP case, but it was actually as part of that is when I was given the task. You need to get out there and understand what's being flown, what's being developed, and it was good because we looked at some of the historical studies that had been done by, say, CIA.
Okay.
And CIA thought that a vast majority of the UFO cases in the late 50s and early 60s were actually citizens who were detecting the U-2s at altitude, because back then they were aluminum and they were flying at altitudes that aircraft weren't expected to be seen at. And then when we started developing the SR-71, the same thing there. One of the things I learned from the British historical report that they did about 10 years before us, they thought a high percentage of the UAP cases and UFO cases being reported in the UK were actually their citizens detecting U.S. stealth aircraft operating in airspace.
Okay.
And then I think I had mentioned the story when I was a Marine in the field where we had picked up a F-117 before they were public. In an exercise, and there was a IHawk battery out there that took a picture of, or took a film or image of one.
Yeah.
And then we found out later that we gave the film back, or had to destroy it, give them the tape.
Yeah.
They're not invisible. And that was before they were public. We did not have a need to know. But exactly. I remember when, seeing it fly, and it's got this weird flying triangle thing from the aspect that I could see it from.
Yeah, exactly. We got one more. Well, this is really a question, but I'll put it up. Tim Phillips, if you're ever in Massachusetts by chance, if you ever, we are love to host and Skywatch if you're free. That's William Underwood. And William
I was
Underwood
actually
says,
born in Massachusetts.
Keep it going. We appreciate you and your work, Mr. Phillips.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. I love it out there. My mom's family is from the Fall River, Cape Cod, New Bedford area. So that's where I was born. My father was flying out of Otis Air Force Base.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, my uncle and grandfather were out of Nellis, Las Vegas.
Yeah, that's a lovely place.
Oh,
that's when it was a drive to get to Nellis, and now you can see the strip from the airbase.
Yeah, it's because it grew to the base.
It sure did.
All right. Well, if you have to go, sir, that's fine. There's no more questions out there. So, he said, what part of Massachusetts?
Oh, they were from Fall Rivers, New Bedford.
Okay. So yeah, we'll let you go, Tim. Anytime you want to come back on to drop some stuff, you're more than welcome to contact me and drop it on the podcast. You know what I mean? If you ever have anything come up, come back around. We'd love to have you on.
Will do. Hey, thank you, Jane, your audience.
Hey, thank you very much, sir.
Out here.
Oh, that was Tim Phillips. Everybody, that was a wonderful conversation we had. You're very welcome, Julian. I'm very fortunate actually to have him on, and very happy that he was able to make it on. If anybody has anything, the only thing that I have right now before we end the podcast is that the next one coming up will be Sacred Pathways, Awakening the Divine Blueprint with Jennifer and Tanya's, and that will be on Memorial Day, on Monday. Let me see if I can find the time here. I think it's 5:00 p.m. Yeah. So 5:00 p.m. we're going to have Jennifer and Tanya here, Awakening the Divine Pathways. They are both very, very spiritual. They guide people in meditation. They are great teachers and great listeners. And I hope you guys will tune in. And like I always say, Galactic family, like, this is awesome. Okay. We have had the most success in the last couple weeks that I have ever seen, and I'm loving it. Like, this is only the beginning. Like I said, like we have a lot of stuff that's going on, a lot of stuff in the background going, and we're actually we're pretty much getting there when it comes to, you know, guests and everything else that are coming on. If you guys have any guest ideas, send them to me. Send them to my email. I'd love to have anyone on. It doesn't matter. If you have something that you would like to say that's a benefit to the UFO community, come on my podcast. You're more than welcome. Thank you guys. And as always, Galactic family, I love you guys and have a good night.